Hello everyone, my name's Mark Wang. I'm here with my partner Ensign, and the topic of our presentation today is analyzing the feasibility of hydrogen as an energy source. Here's the abstract. Please pause to read it. Imagine a world where our energy comes from the most abundant element in the entire universe. Hydrogen fuel stands at the frontier of the clean energy resolution. Unlike any other traditional energy sources in our past, hydrogen presents a versatile and sustainable solution. It is widely used in various fuel cells and engines. The best part is, the only byproduct during its combustion is water and heat. Now let's look at how is hydrogen fuel produced. The first method is natural gas reforming. In this process, high temperature steam react with methane, the main component of natural gas. This reaction produces hydrogen, carbon monoxide, and a small quantity of carbon dioxide. The first step, the reaction. Methane and steam combine at temperature between 700 degrees Celsius and 1000 degrees Celsius, catalyzing a reaction that initially formed hydrogen and carbon monoxide. The second step is purification. Through a water-gas shift reaction, more hydrogen is produced from the carbon monoxide and steam mixture. Finally, using pressure swing absorption, we purify the mix, removing carbon dioxide and impurities, leaving behind pure hydrogen. Here's the chemical reaction. Some advantage to this producing process is the utilization of the otherwise abundant natural gas. Another advantage is that its process is very mature and well researched. Some disadvantages are, first, there's still greenhouse gases in the process, so it's not 100% eco-friendly, but it is important to note that it is much less than the greenhouse gas emitted from the gasoline production. Another disadvantage is that it's currently not the primary research goal. Now let's move on to the next production method, electrolysis. Electrolysis is our gateway to carbon-free hydrogen. Using electricity to split water into hydrogen and oxygen. This transformative process takes place in an electrolyzer, which can be as small as a household appliance or as large as a central facility, ideally powered by renewable or nuclear sources. There are many different types of electrolysis: the alkaline, polymer, solid oxide. They have different materials, but they all functions in the same premise. As for some advantage for this process, first of all, it emits zero greenhouse gases in theory, and it's the frontier of hydrogen production research. Another thing to note is that it has great compatibility with other electricity production, such as wind turbines, since those usually have excess electricity produced. As for some disadvantage, primarily is the cost, specifically the cost of energy consumed. So you heard a lot of the advantages of the hydrogen fuel. What is stopping the mass implementation of hydrogen energy after all? First of all, it's the cost. Due to technological limitations, hydrogen energy and the utilization of it currently just cannot reach the same cost efficiency of many other sources of energy. The good news is the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy of the United States is aiming for $1 per kilogram of hydrogen by the year of 2030. And another thing that is stopping its implementation is the lack of infrastructures, primarily the hydrogen stations, pipelines, and storage. Now I will hand it to Ensign.
Hi, I'm Anson, and I'm going to be now discussing the applications of hydrogen storage. So now that we know how hydrogen acts and sort of how hydrogen storage works, we can now discuss the applications in the real world, and that's being researched. And so due to the easier production of hydrogen fuel through various techniques, hydrogen as an energy source has been researched very heavily, both in industry and sort of just in the lab. Some of which that we're going to discuss include acting as a seasonal and secondary supporting energy source, as a portable power in things such as space exploration, and finally in the automotive industry. And to start off with seasonal and secondary supporting energy source, the idea is that rather than being placed as a primary fuel source, hydrogen can act sort of as a compensation for these energy sources that are more reliant on things such as environment or seasonal factors. In this case, we can explore two of them, such as solar and wind energy. Secondly, in space exploration, it's already being used by things like NASA since their Apollo program, and it's a popular choice for not the first initial rocket stages, but the later rocket stages when extra thrust is needed for just a little more propellant upwards. And finally, we have in the automotive industry, car manufacturers include Honda, Hyundai, and Toyota, who already have cars out there on the streets that are hydrogen powered. And sort of the idea is that this is another appealing form of renewable energy transportation, in addition to something like EVs and an alternative to the gas counterparts that are so dominant right now. And so, support as a secondary seasonal energy, we have solar and wind energy. And so, we have been examining this to counteract the highly environmental dependent um, energy that wind and solar energy are due to the inevitable mismatches between energy production and demand. On the graph on the right, we can clearly see there is a surplus in wind and solar energy in these months, such as April and May. Obviously, because something like solar energy relies on these solar farms to gather solar energy from the sun. So during cloudy days, such as we can see in these October, November months, where it might be more cloudy, solar energy doesn't fare too well. Same thing with wind energy during these spring months, such as April and May. The No matter how good our placement is, this sort of drops down in these October, November months where the wind maybe isn't so active in the areas that we place them. And so hydrogen can be produced during these periods of excess renewable energy generation. And the idea is that we can store this for an extended period of time to cover these later months that renewable energy sources, such as wind and solar, or other alternative energy sources suffer. And even so, we also have the monetization of hydrogen storage, which is possible, not just sort of as like a fancy new thing, but sort of as something that can make money. In one of the research papers we found, they said that hydrogen storage with up to 1 week of discharge duration could be cost effective in the near future if their power and energy capacity capital costs are equal to or less than these values by 2025. So it still is possible for hydrogen energy to work out cost effectively. The next point we're going to take a look at is in space exploration, where hydrogen storage is used as a portable power source. And as I mentioned before, it's already being used by NASA as a fuel in their rocket engines for extra thrust in later stages. So, the three benefits of hydrogen that have sort of been analyzed already by these industry leaders is that first, it has a low molecular weight. Hydrogen itself is just one proton and thus only has a very low molecular weight of around 2.16 grams per mole. We can compare this to the most dominant energy source, petroleum, gasoline, which already has um, a molecular weight ranging around 60 to 150 grams per mole. So we can clearly see even around like the lightest weight, it's 30 times heavier than hydrogen. And it's also very efficient in that it has high energy content per weight, around 120 megajoules per kilogram, which is 3 times more than gasoline. And all of this sort of leads to hydrogen being used in their rockets that NASA use, because they can combine it with an oxidizer like liquid oxygen, which leads to high efficiency in fuel consumption, which leads to longer thrust for a longer time. It's also very convenient to be portable in that it takes the form of either a liquid or pressurized gas. So it's very easy to transport, and it only burns nothing but water vapor. So compared to something like gasoline, which is very carbon emission heavy, and it's also more dangerous than something like hydrogen. And this is a brief diagram of the Saturn V rocket. Here we can see in the second and third stage, liquid hydrogen was used to propel the rocket up. Next, we can finally look at automotive applications as one of the final points that we're going to examine. And compared to its gasoline counterparts, we can see that the idea is that we want to diversify these energy sources that we're using. Obviously, gasoline and petroleum is used in many other applications and has a long-standing history in automotive, but also for powering these factories in our everyday lives. And we sort of want to diversify this. And so for hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, it starts from the fuel cell stack, where hydrogen is used and combined with oxygen to generate electricity and turn these electric motors that runs the car. And later on, it's burned, quote unquote, through water vapor. So it's very clean. And so this is what automotive leaders such as Toyota, Hyundai, and Honda sort of use as the basis for their HFCVs. We can quickly analyze the benefits of this compared to their counterpart vehicles. So gasoline obviously burns a lot, like I mentioned a lot of times before. And so hydrogen vehicles are clearly the better choice in that department. Hydrogen also can serve as an energy source for factories and power plants while being safer than gasoline and easier to maintain. Compared to EVs lose range and performance in colder climates. Hydrogen vehicles do not. And EVs also take a very long time to recharge as well as have lower ranges, as we can see. And finally, the cons. Ironically, hydrogen vehicles don't directly power the car. They generate electricity and turn the electric motors, which EVs also use. And due to low popularity compared to something such as gasoline, which is long-standing, hydrogen fuel is pretty expensive as it's not very well developed. Even though hydrogen is abundant, it's not so in the pure form of H2, which is what we want, as well as the fact that it loses around 70% or as much as 70% of energy content when it's being produced and transported. Thank you so much. Those were the applications of hydrogen, how it worked, and how it's being used in the industry and the real world. These are the references.